Penguin presents Secrets by Lesley Pearse, read by Sophie Ablett.
Part 1. Chapter 1. January 1931. Adele had a stitch from running by the time she reached Euston Road. She was late for collecting Pamela, her 8-year-old sister, from her piano lesson on the other side of the busy main road. Aside from the darkness and the usual 6 o'clock heavy traffic, crossing the road was made even more hazardous by the lumps of blackened ice in the gutters from a fall of snow a few days previously. Adele Talbot was 12, small, thin, pale-faced and waif-like in a worn adult tweed coat many sizes too large for her, woolen socks fallen to her ankles and a knitted pixie hood covering her straggly brown hair. Yet, despite her still tender years, there was an adult expression of anxiety in her wide, greenish-brown eyes as she hopped from foot to foot, impatiently watching for a break in the traffic. Her father was supposed to have collected Pamela on his way home from work, but he forgot, and Adele was frightened that her little sister might have got tired of waiting for him and set off for home on her own. Poised on the curb, panting from her run, she suddenly spotted Pamela through the traffic. There was no mistaking her. The streetlights picked up her long blonde hair and her vivid red coat. To Adele's dismay, she wasn't just waiting either, but hovering on the curb as if intending to cross on her own. "Stay there!" Adele yelled out, waving her arms frantically. "Wait for me!" Several more buses came past in close succession, preventing Adele from seeing what her sister was doing, and suddenly there was an ominous squeal of brakes. Heart in mouth, Adele darted out between a bus and a lorry. As she reached the centre of the road, her worst fears were realised. Her little sister was lying crumpled on the ground between a car and a taxi. Adele screamed. All the traffic stopped abruptly, steam rising like smoke from the bonnets of cars. Pedestrians halted, gasping in shocked horror. Everyone was looking at the small mound in the road. "Pamela!" Adele yelled out, as she ran to her, terror, disbelief and absolute horror enveloping her. The taxi driver, a big man with a fat belly, had got out of his cab and was now staring down at the child between his front wheels. "She just ran out!" he exclaimed, looking round wildly for assistance. "I couldn't help it!" People were already crowding around, and Adele had to push and shove to get through them. "Don't touch her, love," someone said warningly, as she finally got right into the circle and crouched down beside her sister. "She's my little sister," Adele gasped, tears streaming down her wind-whipped cheeks. "She's supposed to wait until she's met. Will she be all right?" Yet even as Adele asked the question, she sensed that Pamela was already dead. Her blue eyes were open wide, her expression startled, but there was no movement or sound, not even a grimace of pain. Adele heard someone say an ambulance had been called, and a man stepped forward, felt Pamela's pulse, and removed his coat to place it over her. But he shook his head as he did so. That, and the stricken faces of everyone gathered round, confirmed her fears. She wanted to scream, to pummel the taxi driver responsible. Yet at the same time she couldn't believe Pamela's life was over. Everyone had loved her. She was so bright and funny, and she was too young to die. Leaning over her sister, Adele smoothed Pamela's hair back from her face and sobbed out her shock and heartbreak. A woman in a fur hat took hold of her round her waist and drew her away. "Where do you live, sweetheart?" she asked, holding her tightly against her chest and making a comforting rocking movement. "Are your mum and dad at home?" Adele didn't know how she replied. All she was aware of in that moment was the rasp of the woman's coat against her cheek and the feeling she was going to be sick. But she must have answered her questions before she broke free to vomit by the curb, for later, after the arrival of the ambulance and the police, she heard the same woman informing them that the sister of the child who had been run over was Adele Talbot, and she lived at 47 Charlton Street. Yet, in the time until the police and the ambulance arrived, Adele wasn't aware of the faces of those around her, what they said to her, or even the biting cold wind. She felt only her own anguish, saw only the golden glow of streetlights picking out Pamela's blonde hair fluttering in the wind on the black, wet road, and heard only the noise of car horns honking impatiently. Euston belonged to her and Pamela. Maybe to
Sample complete. Ready to continue?